live and in person.
We're live and yes, this is actually the AI versions of JDM and Cameron coming at you here. We are secretly very remote. I am on a beach just outside Puerto Vallarta, and Cameron is somewhere in Southeast Asia.
He's still at the Carlson Center.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. Very unfortunate. But yeah, we are starting. Well, I don't even know what to say now, because ordinarily we're Fridays at noon, and then we moved it to Thursday at noon, and then we didn't start at noon, so I don't know what is actually happening here. Apologies for that. We are trying to get more consistent with our timing, but it has been a bit crazy with the with schedules and whatnot. So fun. But we're here to take your questions. We got time here. Cameron, I'm sure, is going to warm up the chat there, and we have a couple of questions. We have 2 questions that were submitted in advance that we will of course tackle in our limited time now together. Again, apologies for that. But if you've got a question, you can drop it in there live. We actually have some people in the room here. It's not a live event or anything, but we have some people in the room here who have a sort of question that they want to ask, and so we welcome them to ask whatever questions they might have as well. So that's pretty cool. I'm happy to dive in. Cameron, how you doing today? You doing good?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Let's rock and roll.
All right, cool. I'm gonna go down to the bottom of our chicken scratch, because apparently our chicken scratch has notes we actually need, which is not normal for us. But okay, we've got our questions in there. Should we do this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hop on in.
Boom. All right, we're going to start with a B2B SaaS for mobile bartenders doing weddings and private events. I didn't really know that was a thing.
Oh, really?
I guess it makes sense. Like if the venue doesn't do it, like you pay for catering, you have to pay for a bartender, or like you would a DJ. But yeah,
they're pretty cool.
We did ours at a winery. We already got the bartenders built in. All right, cool. They're at the unpaid pilot stage, and they say Beautiful. That's our favorite stage. Event bartending is super seasonal. Everyone gets married May through October. Then November hits and it's dead until spring. We have 15 bartenders and pilots right now. It's January. Thank you for the reminder. They thought we were going to read this question 6 months from now. And they're barely using the software because they have like 1 event per month. Come May, they'll be slammed and probably love us again. But how do we evaluate product market fit when usage completely depends on wedding season? And more importantly, do we build a subscription business when customers only really need us 6 months out of the year? They've already asked about pausing their subscriptions in winter. Same issue with our revenue projections. They're going to be wildly different summer versus winter. Investors are going to think our business is dying every November. So.
Well, so I think the first thing, if you don't mind me hopping in, was this person shared kind of the phrase here. I'll just reread the sentence. Come May, they'll be slammed and probably love us again. But how do we evaluate product market fit when usage completely depends on wedding season? I want to highlight product market fit and usage don't go necessarily hand in hand. It's really about, are they actual paying customers? And so when we think about product market fit, it's not just purely about getting your product to market and people using it. It's them actually paying for that. I mean, you can get it in front of them in this efficient fashion to ultimately grow and scale. And so it's not merely just about them using it. So you don't have product market fit doing these unpaid pilots where you have a bunch of people doing unpaid pilots. It doesn't really convert until you actually have those paying customers. And so just want to have that as a cautionary tale, is it's not purely about driving usage. It's about value creation and then you capturing that value back.
Right. And we've talked about this before, or maybe on the podcast, but there's actually no such thing as product market fit without a paying customer. Right. So you're not chasing product market fit right now anyway. And so the idea that you're doing these unpaid pilots, which really just usage-based pilots, you're not getting any value of it. So we actually haven't proven yet that there's anything there worth pursuing, and so you're already flagging a problem that's basically premature. Will these people pay for it? And then if they will, are they going to pay for it seasonally? Well, can you switch to an annual payment or something like that? And they can pay upfront, or they can pay in installments or something like that throughout the year. Like there's ways to do that. You can also switch from a subscription basis to a per usage basis, so they can pay payments can be based on the actual bookings that get made or something like that. So then your revenue isn't going to be consistent throughout the year, but their perception of that value is more aligned with how they're with what they're paying for. So there are lots of things like that, but all of this is really premature if you can't get any customers to pay anyway.
Right. Well, and so the reason we kind of highlighted at the start this unpaid pilot is we've kicked that can down the road in terms of even testing what that strategy will be if they're willing to pay for the annual or even kind of this usage base or whatever that ultimately looks like. So we pushed that risk off for the long term versus moving that upfront as part of our current piloting element of things. So and so I think also, and based on some of these answers, we're forecasting that these might be things that they're saying, but you haven't put a sufficient enough offer in front of them to actually see if that's the case. So we don't actually know about that pausing conversation because we've never actually had the conversation to put that offer in front of them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Wow.
So
I hate when we agree.
I know, that's very interesting. Like let's do a cage fight. Let's just let's figure something out.
We got a fighter behind us, so
I should be careful what I say, or I'm gonna get my ass kicked. Yeah, I don't think the practice I got, when I was in second grade or something like that, has prepared me for fighting as an adult. But I'll warn you, Ricky, I play dirty. Oh. All right. So cool. I think that kind of answers that. Probably not too much more to say on that. If you guys got a live question, feel free to drop it into the chat. Those of you who are,
I'll just make sure see if the chat is working. So I'll try type something in there and let's see. So.
Cool. And then Ricky, if you've got a question, feel free to ask. We got you. All right. So we'll go to the next question here. Our actually last submitted question in advance. All right, this is comic book artists doing commissions and selling at conventions. So it's a marketplace. Their product is live, but they are pre-revenue. And they say we built a marketplace for comic artists to sell commissions. 380 artists signed up. They post their portfolios and commission prices. Fans can browse and order custom artwork. Sounds good, right? I don't know, does it? Except artists keep undercutting each other on price to get orders. And now the average commission price on our platform has dropped from like 150 to 60 in 3 months. Artists are complaining they can't make money at these prices, but they're the ones lowering them. We take 15% commission, so when they drop prices, we make less too. Do we set minimum pricing? That feels wrong. Do we just let the race to the bottom happen? We're accidentally creating a worse outcome for the exact people we're trying to help. Some artists are doing $30 commissions, which is insane for the amount of work involved. They're devaluing the whole market. Begging the question here.
Yeah, so I think, the first thing that comes to mind for me was, is this the right customer coming onto the platform? So someone that's immediately willing to cut their cost to compete with the next artist. They're not competing on like the value of their art. They're competing on just purely the cost of it. And so I bet there's a set of customers that wouldn't go down that path, but we just haven't attracted them to this particular offering because maybe they're already rocking and rolling with things. Just be cognizant of, yes, you have attracted these people that are willing to cut costs, but is that all commissioned artists in this particular space? So we're kind of lumping that as an assumption and need to, I think, test that going forward. Additionally, is like one thing I would be thinking about is, are they also taking some of these commissions and transactions off of the platform? So they're facilitating the connection. So maybe they've lowered the price, but then future things, now you're not even capturing that value because they continue that transaction off of the platform. So just, you might capture that first one or something, but going down the line, that might be something to be thinking about.
I couldn't take it anymore. I did have to fix the video there. I keep this thing, set on manual because I shoot in controlled circumstances, except when I go out into the field, and I normally take time to fix it. But we were running so late, I just wanted to start. But then we only had one of us in focus at any one time because it had such a shallow depth of field. And then we were very yellow, and I just couldn't take it anymore. You can see the difference between the delayed feed and the live one here. So much better here. Although you can make out Ricky's face now because it had to clap. Anyway, all right, Cool.
Whoa.
So
Whoa. What just happened?
it was a little bit of an aside, a little detour.
Do you have ADHD?
You know, this is why people watch
Do you have ADHD?
our office hours, is for the delight, for the whimsy and
They haven't even
caprice.
gotten to it yet.
Hey, they just said that the
I know. That's the chat. The chat's live.
They all just left. Nobody's here anymore. Do I have ADHD?
So no, I heard of this thing called ADHD dolphining, where basically like you go super deep on a thing and then you have to pop back up.
Does that describe me?
That's kind of what you just did, yeah.
Boop. And
nothing wrong with that.
Yes, point of fact. So this still hasn't caught up. It's on like a really long delay. All right. Okay. So my thoughts on this, yes to everything that you said. And I think that there's a broader thing about like markets as opposed to marketplaces that I want to say. So you say that they're devaluing the market. They're not. They don't get to make that choice. This is what two people who are willing to conduct a transaction together, they get to decide that. And if they're willing to do a certain quality of work for $30, then that is like, they made that choice and somebody was willing to pay the $30 for that. And so if they're like that,
Sorry, it just made me think of like, for some of these examples, people are doing things for free. Like you're getting your solution away from
this, in fact, your pre-revenue, you are doing this for free. So talk about devaluing the market. So I kind of want to caution that you're saying that that you're devaluing the market, and that's not true. If they're making a race to the bottom, that is basically on them because they're choosing to compete on price as opposed to competing on quality. For example, they're not like why are there like and again if assuming that all the customers are there, if they were selling in person at that $150 price point before, then like maybe in person at a conference or something like that, then we know that those other customers are out there. It's a question of whether or not they want to use a platform or if they only bought because it was a souvenir while they were in person at at Comic-Con or something, or at one of those manga conferences that happen in Kyoto every year, something like that. What?
No,
Fun fact. And they actually attract like 1 million people. Like it's insane. So that's my actually only like connection to this comic book like space is that I know that like they do all those custom manga and everything, which is actually it's wild like how big of a business that is. And so like when you think like when you connect that to like a market like this, and you see like there's so many people, like yeah, there's going to be some subset of them are probably bought as a souvenir while they were there, but the rest of them are just manga fans, and so they're going to whatever. And so it may be the same with comic books, although considerably smaller audience, I think. Right. But anyway, so if those people are out there and you can get them on the platform, then it's up to them what that transaction looks like. What a marketplace, all it does is make it more efficient for two people to conduct business. So there's nothing that a marketplace does that you can't do offline because all they're doing is facilitating a transaction from between two people who want to do a transaction together. It's just making that transaction easier to happen. So the rest of the marketplace dynamics just aren't up to you. It could be a factor of who you're bringing on the market, but otherwise, like the market's going to do what the market's going to do. The market sets prices. That's how capitalism works. And so I want to turn then to the actual problem that you might have, which has to do with your commissions. So if you're just making less on these things, then there's a question that I have, which is, are we actually losing money for something like this, or are we dramatically limiting our potential such that it no longer becomes an interesting business when we have all these low dollar ones? Then we could say, okay, can we become the premium marketplace, and what would that look like? Or alternatively, you need to change the pricing structure. And that might be something like by setting a minimum commission, which I do see other places. So I don't necessarily have an objection with that. It's like there's a minimum fee that you pay. Like you and I were talking about, what's the sidecar? Mm-hmm. Right? Like they have a minimum. Yeah,
minimum amount based on how much, say, an investment is. So, so it's like you have to at least meet that. If you don't meet that threshold, you still have to pay that baseline amount.
Exactly. So, like that's I don't see necessarily an issue with that. And having that minimum threshold is probably going to kick off the people who are doing that lower dollar volume, because if they're doing $30 commissions and the
minimum is $10 or something.
Right. So, yeah, now it's 20, right? And so they're gonna have to jack up their prices for something like that, or they'll leave the platform entirely, which again, if this is a financial question for you, then we don't care about that actually very much. So I think I wouldn't be too afraid of something like that, but I would say that this is a math question. But all of this is sort of irrelevant for the same reason that the question was irrelevant the first time, which is you're still pre-revenue. So it's all this is theoretical. Are people actually going to pay that fee? And are they going to pay for it continually? There's lots of other questions that I have on here because you actually have transactions going through. I'm really curious why you're not taking money if you have transactions going through. Like, I don't understand why you would do that. But because you're going through without, any stake in those transactions, then I'm really curious about some other factors as well. Things like what's the transaction completion rate? So how, like when somebody goes to actually commission one of these works, I don't know the actual mechanics of the platform because you haven't said it, but so I'm assuming artists are listed here and they have profiles or whatever, and then somebody goes to look and find an artist to do. How many of the people who go and look for an artist to do a work actually end up hiring an artist to commission a work? That what we call the transaction completion rate is the most important metric for a marketplace. So I'm really curious about that number as well. I think that might tell us something about that audience. I don't know. I think that horse is very dead and bruised.
Yeah, I think the last point that I would make is like if part of the platform is to drive efficiency. So thinking, we used this in our last podcast where we talked about the cost to acquire a customer. And so basically you creating that efficiency is decreasing their cost to acquire the customer currently. And so allowing them to actually drop that price because they're not spending that time trying to get the customer. And so what usually from them commissioning that work, there was work they had to do beforehand to be able to get the paying customer. And so maybe that's why they were pricing it so high versus the amount of time that it takes them to actually deliver the work. And so your efficiency could be helping them in driving that. And that's, again, market dynamics. That's not necessarily your platform doing the wrong things, because that might allow them to now go from being able to only access one customer to 10 customers. And so maybe the price per transaction goes down, but they're able to make a greater volume of transactions because there's more efficiency. So I think there's more to peel apart there, but ultimately you have to get back to the foundations of looking at when you actually turn on that transaction, that being you actually taking a portion of it or some other way that you're monetizing, seeing how the market reacts to that.
Yeah. Totes. Wicked. Cool. So those were our two questions in advance. If you guys got a question out there in listener land, I know you guys are there watching. We see that in there. Drop that question into the chat, either here or over here, and we would, or over here, I think, because I'm actually surprised Restream isn't flipping the video back, which I expected it to. So I was trying to reverse in my mind when the chat's actually there. This is my right hand.
See, the dolphin.
Well, it was like it's in real time. It's happening. I'm providing running commentary when really I'm vamping to see if anybody has a live question.
Maybe we can open it up to our in-person audience. Any startup questions? We got Ricky or Richie here. So we got R squared in the space. Any startup questions you all are navigating, thinking through? Richie, you got one?
Still thinking on one.
They're still thinking. They're maybe just to give everyone a quick pitch on what is Headshot.
Yeah, so Headshot X is a headgear that is specifically designed to help boxers improve their performance as well as protect them from any future brain or reduce the risk of future brain injuries. And I guess one question I can think of that did pique my interest is a customer acquisition, right? The cost of customer acquisition at what percent? I don't know if you guys would know the percent on top. So let's say it costs $100 to build the headgear, and then we sell it at $200, right? So 50% or whatnot. At what price would I want to be able to acquire a customer?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Teed it up for our. Listen to our podcast episode. No.
So we do have last week's podcast, and I think the one that drops tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Ordinarily, I guess it would be tomorrow because we do this on Fridays. But is we have some stuff on some of those figures, so I would do that. But a couple things come to mind for me. So one is there's generally with physical goods that you sold, there's a multiple that you're looking for that includes all of the cost. So like the cost of the good and the customer acquisition cost, you usually looking for something like 3 to 1. All in. So if it costs you $100, you're selling it for $200, you're already behind. But
Well, I was just making them.
yeah, I know. But so I think that there's that. Do you guys have a subscription that you charge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So and then what's the subscription?
It'd be like $7.99.
$7.99 a month. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't done any testing on that.
All right. Let's say $10 just to make math easy. All right. So like you have $200 and then you have okay. So what is the average retention that we're going to have for something like this?
Yes.
And so like how long are you expecting them to continue paying their subscription?
Probably 2 years. Maybe a year. Realistically, a year.
It's a big difference between those things.
12 months.
12 months. All right. So now we have 12 months. All right. So let's say it's 12 months, it's $10 a month. So it's that's $120 that you're getting out of that. And then you had the $200 that you sold. I know all these numbers are made up, but like the $200 that you sold it for, right? But only 100 of that was actually money for us, right? So now we're at $220. Is actually the gross receipts from this person. So the number that we're actually after is the lifetime value, and the lifetime value of this is going to be the customer acquisition cost subtracted from that figure.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so that's one factor. And so what's the most you're going to make from any cover? Technically, anything above 0 is not the train wreck, even though it's a train wreck. So the lower that number is, the higher your lifetime value. There's a second piece of this too, which is the payback period. So if the money you're making on the device is less than the customer acquisition cost, like if you, let's say, the cost $100, the device is $200, and it costs you, $150 to get a customer, then we're starting that, 50 in the hole, right? Which is 5 months of the subscription. So the payback period is 5 months. And so then you need to make sure that your average retention is above 5 months, or you're permanently losing money as well.
Yes.
Right. Even if your average lifetime value ends up being that 120, like if the average retention is still on the low end, so like if you have some customers are staying for 5 years and other customers who are staying for 1 month and then canceling a subscription, like even if it nets out with a positive lifetime value, the payback period is going to end up being negative. So basically, all the customers that you're acquiring is just money you're never getting back.
Yes.
And so that speaks to some inefficiency. So there's a lot of math that goes into that. Like if you, but none of that is like the answer that you were looking for, which I acknowledge. So I'm gonna pause and see if Cameron has anything to say, and then we can try to like maybe say something more specific.
No, I think the biggest thing is like breaking down. There's like 3 major metrics or things that come to mind. So we have the cost to acquire a customer. So like what energy, like that could be ads, that could be your sales process to selling to say an institution. Like what does that cost overall look like? And then you have your cost of goods sold, and then you have the lifetime value of the customer. And so that being the actual sale of the thing as well as a subscription on top of that. And so what we see is that people don't always account for the cost to acquire a customer within that. They're like, oh, it takes $100 to make this thing, and then we're selling them, but not realizing every new customer, they're actually losing money because they're not ever hitting that payback period. And so like every time they spend $1 on marketing, they're losing $10 in terms of the company, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that as you're getting started, you don't have that engine fully going. And so like it's a bit more manual. So your cost to acquire a customer in the sense of like you doing like sales can look different than it would in the long term. So, but you want to understand some of those foundational unit economics just as you look to scale and be more efficient. So.
If you guys watching on LinkedIn or YouTube have any thoughts on this, drop them into the chat. We'll be happy to share them on air here. It's you go to like figure out these numbers, and like consumer packaged goods is not my specialty, so I do want to kind of acknowledge that a little bit. But we are really just again looking for when I say the math and he says the engine, we're basically saying the same thing, right? Is that there's a model of headshot that we're saying works. So it's and you can think pirate metrics, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's this model that we could literally just put into a spreadsheet super fast and then start checking numbers at, and then all of those are levers that you can pull. And so you're going to start with an hypothesis that's reasonable, we hope, right? But you're gonna start with an hypothesis, and then in the hypothesis of that growth engine, you're going to then have just a series of assumptions. And then as you start getting data back, then we're going to start turning those assumptions into validated learning. And so then we're going to revise our priors, and through this process we call Bayesianism, but you're going to revise your priors based on new data that are coming in. And so with each new piece of data, we have either increases our confidence or decreases our confidence, and then we revise the model as we go through. But on top of that, what we also want to do is, when we consider this whole model, if like one of the things you might be, for example, really dependent on is that retention on those monthly subscriptions. And so that if you're not like, and then, you know, for like, well, we need them to stay for a year, then basically like we got to wait a year to find out. And like, that sucks, right? We don't want to do that. So what we actually want to do is, and this is what we call innovation accounting, is we want to kind of flip that and say, like, instead of looking at these lagging indicators, right? So like we could wait a year and tell us if a year ago we were successful, but fuck that shit, right? Like, so like instead, what are the leading indicators, the things that we can actually measure today that show that we're on the right track for that? And so that's going to depend on like where you are at any stage. You're just going to continually picking different leading indicators, right? Because, you know, they'll move. But here's an example. So like, let's say that you go to, you know, sign up people for these subscriptions, and then the first thing that they do is, you know, they sync their headgear with the app, right? And then they're going to maybe log a session, and then they're going to get all of the, you know, their headshots, right? And like, and they're going to get all the analytics and the details and so forth coming out of that. And we'll call that their first win. Right? They're getting something out of it that they were hoping to get out of it. So one of the things that we're going to look for right away is what we call the activation rate, which is how quickly and at what percentage are we getting people to that first win. And so what we want is for that to happen in the first session, right? Users who get value stay, users who don't churn. That's pretty self-evident. So then we're going to look for, well, of the people who sign up for them, how many activate the first session? Yeah. So like they sign up and immediately they're connecting it, and then they're getting that value out of it. Or how many of them connect it and then don't engage in a session right away, because those people are more likely to churn. And so like we can measure that today, and then if we're not seeing it, we change something, and tomorrow we measure it again, and tomorrow we measure again, and tomorrow we measure again, and we're constantly tweaking this thing that we don't have to wait a year to see, because we know that long-term retention is based on that short-term activation. And then we can keep going with that. So like then we'll say, all right, well, how many of them, like let's say in order for our retention to stay up at that year point, we're looking for weekly active users, right? Okay, it's you know, boxing. They're not doing it every day, right? Or a lot of them aren't doing it every day, but we should be seeing them doing it regularly, whatever that translates to for your customer. So then we're going to say, well, we need these set of weekly active users. So now we're going to look at the activation rate as that early warning system against the weekly active users, but then still short of a year, we can check weekly active users, and we can check how many of them come back every week. So we can also be monitoring weekly retention. So now is that lagging still? Yes, it's still lagging, but it is leading the long-term retention indicator, right? And each one of those become early warning systems that we're not going to hit that long-term thing. And so based on the individual specifics of where you are, the goal is to look for to look for what that leading indicator is. At the Traction Lab, we actually have something that we call the leading indicator framework, which is like this 4-step process. The lift. It's called the lift. I was tempted to add tool to the end, so it'd be the lift, but the leading indicator framework. And it's this 4-step process that you can go through to identify those leading indicators. I actually have a couple of video shorts dropping on my channel, I think next week, that are on.
It's actually called the lift, the leading indicator framework for traction.
The leading indicator framework for traction, yes, obviously. So you can kind of check out some of those. They'll be on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Oh, and probably LinkedIn too. But anyway, so for those of you out there, I'm the real JDM on all those except for LinkedIn, where you'll see me tagged in this thing. So you can check those videos out. We'll probably be putting a Traction Thinking article up on it sometime soon as well. So, you know, engage with us in Substack, and we can have a more detailed conversation about it too. But basically, it's a simple 4-step process that has to do with identifying the risky assumption that we're working on. Once you have the risky assumption, picking a leading indicator that tests for that. So like that, again, long-term retention versus the short-term activation rate. So we can pick a leading indicator, picking a threshold against that indicator. And so like we were expecting to see 70% activate in their first session, which I think is a reasonable number. And then lastly, you run that experiment. That'll work. If it worked, double down. If it doesn't work, then something's got to change, because we already know 364 days in advance that we're not going to hit that target. So
Okay.
Yeah. rinse and repeat. So yeah, get that out of the hair, move on. Yeah, that's that. Looking at the chat here, you guys are quiet today, but you've confirmed that you're here, so that's great. So thank you for joining us. Only have a few minutes left, but Richie, I don't know if you've got a question for us.
Give
Okay, if you don't.
us the quick Century Site pitch, and maybe you'll have a quick question we can answer.
Okay.
Feel free to come hang with us.
Awesome.
Take a seat. Take a seat right here.
You can just also.
You can take mine.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Richie Martinez. I am CEO and co-founder of Century Site. So what we do is we use computer vision AI to detect firearms and cameras that are already on infrastructures. So at the moment, I don't believe I have a question, but
Welcome.
But for now, I guess I could ask one.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'd say the hurdles we're coming across are winning the hearts of, I guess, the people that feel that this system is not needed. So I would assume, like, how could we portray our system to win their hearts because they feel like it's too much work, or it's just not needed since it hasn't happened to their school?
The short answer is you don't,
Mm.
because it doesn't work. But one of the things I'll say, so I have another video coming out soon, so it's top of mind here, but and we've talked about this a million times, right? Which is the idea of the diffusion of innovation.
Mm.
So the reason that investors and advisors and people like me and Cameron, the reason we tell startups to like niche down in like right away is because for a number of reasons, but the principal one is that any new market, and you have a new market here, right?
Yes.
Any new market, right away, 84% of people are not going to buy, no matter how good your sales pitch is. 84% of them, just nope, not going to buy. And that's because of this thing that we call the diffusion of innovation. And it's this curve. And so right at the beginning, we have the 2.5% of people who are innovators. So these are people, they want to be on the bleeding edge. Like that's just part of what they are. They're risk takers and all that. Then right after that, you have the 13.5% that we call early adopters. And that early adopter segment there, those are people who have a problem. It's really severe. It's really urgent. And they want to be first, but they actually just really need the fucking problem solved. Like it's really important to them to do. And so like they need that. After that, we have this thing called the chasm, right? Which is hard to cross. And it's a whole other topic. But the next big group is what we call the early majority, which is 34%. And those are people who they have the problem, but they're not going to pay for a solution now, because the only solution that they're going to pay for in this is one that is proven, that has references, that has stability. Whereas those early adopters and innovators, that 16% at the top in those first two groups, they're going to deal with bugs. They're going to deal with inconsistencies and some poor UX, and they're going to deal with the risk of adopting a new solution because they see the potential, because the problem is so severe and urgent. Whereas in that early majority, they don't. And then after that, you have another 34% that's the late majority, and then after that, you have the laggards. And those are people who are skeptical, right? And so like, forget them, right? But like you can't even get to 84% of the market yet. And it's not just about timing, although it does follow a curve of time, but like it's not just timing, it's that the psychology is very different. The people who are early adopters and innovators are thinking about things differently because the problem is different for them. And that's the important thing here. And it's also key to remember, like the wrinkle in all of this is that early adoption and innovation is not a personality trait. Some people are serial early adopters and innovators. Those are the people who go out on product hunt, but they don't stay with a product for very long.
No.
They don't, and so they're not worth it. But it's not really a personality trait. It's situational. We're all early adopters sometimes in some things because we have that really severe and urgent problem that that we really need solved. And so what are those public spaces with cameras that have that problem with such severity and urgency that they do it? Maybe they are ones who just unfortunately had a terrible incident, or that is there some group of people that have a regulatory compliance, or maybe it's something that's like TSA at airports, and they already have this mandate that they're spending money and technology on, that they can save personnel time by doing something. I don't know. I'm bad things for you to turn into good stuff. But what we're looking for is like what separates the 16% from the 84%? What makes this group of people willing to take the risk on a new technology because that problem is so severe and urgent? Who are your early adopters? That's the question. Because the question that you're asking is, how do I sell the 84%? And the question is, and the answer is, you can't.
Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let me add additional maybe context, maybe where I think partly some of the questions going from, and I love where you went with that as well, was like thinking in like B2B sales, he has identified, say, who the economic buyer is, who's the champion. I think one of the things they're butting up against is the saboteur. How do you convince, if at all, that person, or how do you wade those waters when someone who needs to be a part of the decision making, they're not necessarily the purchaser, but they're part of the committee who's going to purchase that, and there needs to be some convincing or lowering their ability to say, yeah, let's proceed with this, because they will have to make an investment in their change in process because they're impacted in some capacity. So how would you address engaging a saboteur in a particular sales process?
Well, to get a really good answer to that question, we're gonna have to bring in a friend who is an enterprise sales expert, because
call a friend.
Yeah, we have to phone a friend right now.
Are you on there?
Yeah, if you're out there in LinkedIn land, or YouTube, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But I can say from not from a tactical perspective, because again, that's not my expertise, but like from a big picture perspective, the saboteurs are saboteurs for a reason, and the reason is going to be what's important. So they're not saboteurs because they want people dead, right? They're probably saboteurs and let me use the TSA example. This is completely made up, but in that example, you might have the saboteur who's the guy in charge of all of the line staff, because if your technology is saving them time, he loses staff. His remit gets smaller. That's no good for him, right? And so he doesn't want that. And so he's going to say technology like this can't possibly catch what we have this institutional experience and whatever. And it might all be bullshit. It might be completely wrong, but he has an incentive to sabotage that. And so your reason to get that saboteur on board is then going to be either finding a way around that just through the sociology and psychology of an enterprise sale and the complex ecosystem, or it's going to be finding some way to get him on board. Okay. And so is there some value that we can give to him? Or if all of those are set up the same, is there a way we can deliver him a personal win and turn him from a saboteur into an advocate? Right. Okay. And so those are some of the things you can have there, but it's going to really depend on the reason that they're saboteurs. In enterprise sales, one of the most common saboteurs we see for technology solutions is the saboteur is IT. And this is because IT is in charge of the solutions, and it's often their budget too. And so if you're spending dollars on this external company as opposed to the internal company, which means less money for IT, but then also it's often IT that would be responsible for whatever manual solution is working right now. And they're like, well, we could do that. We can do all this stuff. And so it's sort of an affront to their egos, right? They're no longer the manly men of IT. They can't even solve this problem. And so they feel emasculated by this external company. I'm probably taking that a little too far, but but that's the vibe. That's what it's giving, right? And so they're going to be saboteurs and something like that. And so then you have to okay, how do we get around that? And is there a way to make IT have wins here as well? Or again, go around it through the sociology and psychology of sales, which again is not my expertise. So. Is that kind of where you're at? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's perfect.
You're just as much experience in enterprise sales as I do.
None.
Which is to say, from the outside,
in theory,
neither one of us have done enterprise sales, I guess is what we're saying by that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for asking a question. I like this round table format. This was fun.
Here we go.
We should open up more of these kinds of traction lab conversations.
They're traction lab conversations. That's exactly what they
It could be our event, a traction lab conversation, TLC. Everybody needs a little TLC. If you guys are ever curious how we come up with acronyms, this is how. All right. Great. Well, we are over time. I know we started really late, so it was a shorter session today. But you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for joining. Richie, thank you guys for the questions in person, for giving your pitch. Hopefully some you guys out there, if you want to connect with them, we'll tag them down in the LinkedIn post. And then feel free to tag yourself in the description on YouTube if you want to. Give me that or in the comment there, and I'll throw it in the description. But So cool stuff. And then I think you were asking in the chat there. Yeah. So if you guys want to join us for some traction like conversations where we, bring some people who are in the lab or bring the camera into the lab, I guess, and have some of these conversations, and
we got
let us know. And we got a question here. Do we have time for a question? We got time for a question. We'll do it. We're already over. Fuck it. All right.
So so the question is, how do you decide to go for a third-party company to do a task versus creating your own team in the company? So like more on the company building. So like, how do you know what to outsource and what to keep in?
Are you ready to put on your corporate innovation hat? We've got that hat. All right. Thank you. It's a hat that I don't wear nearly as often as I used to, so it's super fun to put it on.
It looks a little different.
Looks a little different. Yeah, it doesn't have, I'm not wearing the suit or tie or anything right now, So it's a great question, and there's a few different ways to answer the question. And I don't think there's going to be any right answer, but I think some of the things that I would think through from my own experience in doing corporate innovation is this. So one is internal capability. Like, do we even have the capability to do this internally? So if we're talking about going and hiring a bunch of people, or even just a few people who can execute on something like this, when we don't have experience managing the people who run things like this, we're introducing a lot of risk inside the company. And so I would be inherently skeptical of that. So this is where you get a company that starts to create their own software solution that they're trying to run, and they don't have experience in creating their own software solutions. Then you end up with software solutions everyone hates. And it's also just, again, super risky, particularly if you want to make a market play with that software later. You're just really not setting yourself up for success. So in something like that, I might say like that I would hesitate there, because we're just introducing that risk. There are lots of other ways that you might introduce risk into that process as well, even if you're not talking about like creating technology or hiring people that you wouldn't otherwise have to manage, and that don't come from necessarily capabilities, which is what those other things have in common. Another way that you might introduce a lot of risk into the process is just if something is unknown. Like, let's say you're doing process automation work, like business process automation, which I just used to do a ton of back in the day. If you're doing business process automation, like, you can have like a really detailed, robust, thorough understanding of the business process, but automations come down to edge cases. And so you can end up in this like spiraling pit of despair where you're just constantly running into edge cases because you don't have, and the process that you're developing doesn't have the flexibility for those edge cases, because it's really hard to do. And so you try to do something that's automated, and that automation ends up like stifling work in the company and creating a bunch more work for everybody else. Whereas if you're using some type of external tool to do something like that with external expertise to help manage the business process automation, then that might take some of that risk off the table, because we can again bring in some tools that are able to handle edge cases a bit more gracefully than maybe just having IT do something like that internally. Those are the first few things that come to mind to me, and like the summary of that would be it's a question of risk. Is it more risky to do it internally than it is externally? So that's the first question. The answer is not always yes, but like, is it more risky to do it internally, externally? And then second is, what is the relative cost and or the resources required? Because it's more than just the money, and those are the resources required on staff time and everything else. Then what are our resources internally versus externally, and how does that risk versus that cost balance out? And then what is the overall risk tolerance of the company, and where do we want to err on the side of here? Because we could choose to err on the side of spending less money and adopting more risk, and that's not wrong, right? Or we could choose to say we're going to spend more money to have less risk, and again, that's also not wrong.
Yeah, I think the only last thing was one of the elements is like speed. So if it's something where you have to really build those internal capabilities, but you need to deliver, say, on the project or the offering with urgency, you might have to build up that capabilities in order to deliver on that, and you might miss your target versus going externally. They already have that capability dialed in, and so you're able to deliver on that outcome. But again, that comes with a risk where maybe you actually own less of that offering and things of that nature. So it's always that risk reward components of how we want to invest our time. But thinking of the capabilities as well as readiness is a key component.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're doing something for market consumption, so like if you're trying to create a product that you can then monetize later on, if that's like the I know you said task, Yashik, so that's probably not the best example there, but like if you're doing something like that, then usually it's much less risky and just a much better business decision to have that external, because because in addition to the product risk that you have, you also have market risk that you're taking as well. So let the market sort out the market risk and then just buy that capability. It's much better. This is how a lot of SaaS companies, software as a service companies, get acquired, because they're like, well, why can't Google just do this internally? Well, no, Google's not going to do it because there's no proven market yet, and they're not going to waste their resource on that. They're going to let thousands of startups try, and then the one that works, they're just going to buy because it was cheaper than them trying thousands of things. So, yeah, great question though. That was I love it. That was awesome. All right.
All right.
Well, with that, we will bid you all adieu. Cameron will be back solo next week because I will be out of town traveling.
Bring your tough questions.
And bring your tough questions. Try to stump Cameron. I might hop into the audience for a few minutes and see what happens. And say, I'll just drop my own question.
Will you be the fake JDM?
I'll be. Yes, that's right. I'm going to be the fake JDM on there. But we try to be here every single week. I think we are here, basically like 50 weeks out of the year, or something like that. 49 weeks out of the year. We're pretty good about it, even if we have to switch days. So thank you guys for bearing with us. But next Friday noon, the Traction Lab will be back to take your questions. If you have a question you want to submit in advance, a little bit more breathing room, then you get in the little comment section. Go to jdm.bio calendar, click the link to submit a question. You can get a little more space like the 2 that were submitted this week. So do that. Cameron, thanks for hosting us in your magnificent space.
Thanks for coming on over.
Yeah.
Thanks for a little TLC.
Little TLC. Thanks to Ricky and Richie for joining our little TLCs. That was awesome. And with that,